Well, hello, everybody.
Hello.
My name is not Ms. Audubon. I'm not related to the Audubons. I'm not a reenactor. I'm just a person who loves history. And I'm going to talk about the Audubon family who is buried here. There are 4 of them. Let's see. Caroline is one. That was his daughter-in-law. She was married to his son. She had 2 daughters who are buried here, Maria and
Florence.
Florence, thank you. And a son, Benjamin. And before I talk about the family here, I think I should talk a little bit about John James Audubon, because he was a very famous person. Everybody knows who he was, but maybe not all that we need to know about him. Of course, he was a birder. He wrote a book called Birds of Northeast America, which became the primary book for studying birds. And he was born in Santo Domingo, which is now Haiti, in what date? 1751, something like that. His father was a sailor in the French Royal Navy. His mother was a person of indeterminate parentage and genealogy. We don't know who she was. But at the age of 9, his father decided to take him back home to England, where he was adopted by his father's wife. And he grew up in England in a very nurturing and loving family. At the age of 18, his father decided to send him over to America to manage a lead mine, a general store, and some other businesses that he had over in the new country, in the new world. John James was not a businessman. The only thing he wanted to do was draw birds. He was very good at it. And he traveled all around the United States looking for birds to draw. His way of drawing these birds was first to shoot them, unfortunately. But back then we didn't have cameras, to say nothing of high digital lenses or anything of that sort. So he did a very good job cataloging birds and their habitat. Not only did he draw the birds, he would draw the branch that the bird fell off after he shot them. So we know a lot about what the bird's habitat and habits were like. As I said, he was not a good businessman. So he was financially unsuccessful. And at one point, the sheriff came to his place of business and took all of his assets to pay for his debts. It wasn't enough, and John James wound up in debtor's prison. Now here's a little sidebar to this story. If you want to know more about debtor's prison, check out the site of Shays Rebellion, which is over in Sandgate. There was a fellow called Mr. Shay who refused to obey the laws of the United States, which were to not get paid for being a soldier in the Revolutionary War. That's a whole different story. It's very interesting. And I'm leading up to a point here. And the other thing about debtor's prison, I didn't know this until I was doing a little research into Shays Rebellion. We had this president. His name was Millard Fillmore. Does anybody remember Millard Fillmore and what he did? He abolished debtor's prison. So when you're talking about what the presidents of the United States did, and somebody says, well, what did Millard Fillmore do? Who was he? He abolished debtor's prison. But it was too late for John James. He spent some time in debtor's prison. And understandably, he didn't have a whole lot of money, in spite of the fact that he became famous as an ornithologist. He didn't have a whole lot of money to send down to his descendants. So his granddaughters, Maria and Florence, and his mother, Caroline, were forced to go to work. Maria got a job down in New York City, quite a famous school down there, a very well-known private school. So she taught down there and became assistant headmistress. The headmistress of that school down there liked to get away from New York City in the summertime, and she knew of a really nice place up here in the Northeast. They had some nice little tourist homes. It was called Salem. So she would come up here to Salem for her summers, and she would invite the Audubon girls to come up here too. And she bought a house over on East Broadway, which came to be known as the Audubon House, because when she died in whatever it was, I forget the date, she willed this house over to the Audubon family. So after she died, the girls came up here to live. And they actually lived in this house on East Broadway. And not only did they just live there, but they became benefactors of the community. They became full-time residents, beloved of the community. They had a lot of their father's things, some mementos that he had, a lot of his paintings, and they very generously donated these to the library in Salem, the school in Salem. Very much became a part of the community here in Salem. There was talk about Benjamin over here. I think this is Benjamin here, right? Benjamin was only 30 years old when he died. He died of TB. So after they lived their lives out in Salem, this is where they wound up, here in the cemetery at Evergreen. It seemed to be a perfectly normal place for them to want to be, even though their famous grandfather is buried down in New York City along with some members of his family. He is buried in Trinity Church, and if you know anything about Trinity Church, it's well, it looks like a little bitty church, a little stone church down there on the south end of Manhattan. And I remember on that famous day in 9/11, a few years ago, when the towers came down, monster towers crashing down to the ground. Here's this church, little dinky thing, but it's a stone church. It survived. It's still there, beautiful church, and that's where John James Audubon is buried, along with some other members of his family. But his family wound up here in Evergreen Cemetery. And if you need to know anything else about the family, they're very available on the internet, and it actually mentions where they are buried right up here in Evergreen. So we have a famous little plot here for a very famous family. Now, I wanted to know a little bit more about the Audubon girls, as far as what their reactions and their lifestyle was like in Salem. What did they do? How did they get along with their neighbors? So, I found this book. Now, Al, a few minutes ago, he was talking about, Al, speaking as General Williams, mentioned that the spirit of General Williams is still inherent around this area. I myself have not seen General Williams. I have heard him. I haven't seen him. But I wanted to look in this book. This is the book that Harriet Williams wrote about Salem. And I was hoping I'd find something in this book. It's called the Salem Book. I found nothing in here about the Audubon family except the very top here. Maria Audubon is listed on the historical committee as far as contributing to this book. So that leads me to think that she was an important person in the community. She contributed to the community. She loved it and probably knew a lot about it, but totally modest as far as who she was and who her famous family was. So that's about all I've got to say.